Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing a long-awaited wrap-up video. I haven't done a wrap-up video in a very long time, and I have so many books to talk about. So this might be part one. I may actually break this up into two parts and just do some of the books in this video and then do another one. Maybe the next one will be like a makeup wrap-up video like I did that one time, but we're just going to see how many books I can talk about in this video. And these are books from last year, so 2003, that I haven't gotten to wrap up yet. So let me go to my Goodreads. Okay, so I think the last one I talked about was A Curse for True Love. So Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur was the last one I think that I read that I haven't wrapped up yet. So I actually don't know where this book is. I don't know if I already donated it or what, but I did really want to read this book because I had read The Sun and Her Flowers a long time ago, and I wanted to try out this one because I think this is her first one. And I'm gonna be honest, okay? I'm very picky with my poetry. Like, I don't just love every poetry collection that comes out. You guys know this. I'm pretty darn picky with my poetry collections, and I really hate, like, stereotypical new age kind of poetry. And this collection, I'm gonna be honest, Rupi Kaur isn't, like, the worst poet ever. Like, I like some of her poetry for sure. I think she has a bit more of a knack than, you know, some poetry authors that I've read. There is something about some of her longer poems that I do really like, and I do think that she's a pretty good writer. However, some of her poetry is just very just like filler poetry, that really basic stuff that you're just kind of like, this was a filler, like you're just trying to fill up pages, which I don't like. I much prefer poetry that is very, like, has a purpose, that took a long time to write, that really took a lot of thought to create. And I prefer that poetry a lot more. And I feel like Rupi Kaur's kind of in the middle there. And I think I gave this poetry collection 3 stars, I'm pretty sure, which is pretty good for me as far as rating poetry. So the next book that I read was Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. So this one I actually read on audio, and this one was actually kind of fun. Now, I have a really interesting opinion on this one because I can understand why people would not like this book. I can understand why people would be like, yeah, that was a little too strange for me. And I kind of felt that way. I truly kind of felt that way because I feel like she didn't hit the mark fully with this one, but then I feel like she really hit the mark at times with this one. Like, it was both kind of like I was unsure, but then I also really liked it at the same time. Does that make sense? So this is a book about a woman who becomes a mother and she has a baby, and then she just starts suddenly turning into a dog. Like, she just starts transforming into a dog. And she doesn't really know what's going on. She's like, what the heck? Like, why are all these things happening to me? And she can't figure out why she's turning into a dog. She doesn't want to tell anybody that she's turning into a dog because she thinks she's crazy, kind of. But she's kind of like hinting to her husband, like, I think I am turning into a dog. And it's like this weird, like, transformative thing. And I actually think this book was really interestingly done. So I'm going to read my review, and I'm going to start doing this, I think, in my review so you guys kind of know what I thought, like, right after reading. But my review for this book was, I can understand why some people wouldn't love this. It is a bit out there, but I think it's a really interesting take on motherhood and the transformation we go through as women when we cross over into motherhood. The good, the bad, but also the instinctual and the feral parts as well. I don't think I would have liked this or understood it as much before I became a mother myself. I think the story is less about turning into a dog and more so a metaphor used to describe this transformation and all that comes with it. So the way I took it is the way in which we transform as women when we become mothers. And I think that when you become a mother, it's something that you are not quite prepared for. Like, you don't really know what to expect. Like, you know some aspects of it, but when you become a mother, you become something completely different, right? You become a little bit feral. You become very, like, everything is very instinctual, and, like, sometimes you act a little crazy, and sometimes you act like nothing else matters but your own child, right? Like, the rest of the world doesn't matter. And I think that there was some really interesting takes in this book where I personally took it as a metaphor for motherhood and transforming into motherhood. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what the author was going for. I'm not exactly sure what the author was going for, but that's how I took it. And I think it was so interesting if you read the book in that way. Because I think also what I really liked about it was the author, or the main character, seemed a little bit shameful sometimes of her behaviors. Or sometimes you feel shame for maybe getting too angry or whatever. Like, whatever the case is, you realize so much about yourself that you didn't know before when you become a mom. It's really hard to explain, and I'm trying my best to explain it, but I really truly like this book for that reason. So if you are a mom and you feel like you kind of went through this very transformative time when you became a mother, I think that this book could be a really interesting read for you if you read it in that way. Like I said though, I don't even know if that's what the author was going for, but that's what I really like sometimes about art in general, is how we can interpret it any way that we want sometimes. Even if that's not really fully what the author was going for, I felt like that's how I was interpreting it, and I felt like it made sense to me. So I don't know. I personally kind of thought this was really well done. I gave it a 4-star. There was times where it got a little bit redundant, a little bit long-winded, but other than that, like, I thought it was really cool. I really like this book personally. I wish that I would have actually wrapped this book up sooner, because I feel like some of my key ideas that I had about this book kind of have flitted out of my mind a little bit because it's been a while since I read it, but during the reading process there were so many things that I wanted to talk about with this book, you know what I mean? And now I feel like I can't because it's just been too long. So the next book I read was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. And I was a big Britney Spears girl. Like, I was, you know, born in '85, so Britney Spears was really big when I was like in high school, middle school. And so I was a big Britney Spears girl, you know? She was like our Taylor Swift, kind of. So I read that book, and I have mixed feelings on this book. I gave it 4 stars, but I'm gonna read my review to you guys. I'm so glad Britney was able to tell her side of the story. This book held my attention, and I didn't want to stop reading it. Her life was fascinating, and what she went through was extremely sad and unfair. However, I feel like there were things missing, or just even glossed over. I still don't really understand why the conservatorship happened, how it lasted so long, or why she was put on drugs like lithium. Maybe that was the point she was trying to make. There wasn't a reason, and the system really is just that corrupt. I'm not sure, but I'm finding myself asking more questions than I did before reading this book. With that said though, I really hope she is able to live a free and fulfilled life. She deserves it after years of what she went through. So I don't know, I think there was just things glossed over, just things that were missing. I don't think that she explained everything perfectly, because there were so many things I'm like, well, why would this happen? Why would this happen? Like, why? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I still don't understand how all of this happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like there are 2 sides to every story. However, I do think Britney was very much abused at that time in life, like in the early 2000s. Like, I saw it all happen, what the paparazzi did and what the media did to Britney. She dealt with it worse, I feel like, than any other celebrity at that time. I feel like Britney Spears lived through the absolute worst when it comes to what society does to celebrities. Like, she's the perfect example of, like, just leave them alone sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, leave Britney alone. And I kind of feel like she just lived through really hard parts of being a celebrity and the media, and how we were psychos about celebrities in the early 2000s, like paparazzi and stuff, like insane. Again, this book, I feel like, just missed some things. Missed the mark a little bit. Like, I'm still confused. I still don't understand everything, and I don't know. But it was still good. It was still really interesting. Like, I was obsessed with reading this book while I was reading it. Like, I wanted to listen to it all day long. I did not want to stop listening to it. I was so curious and so invested. So if you have any curiosity about Britney, read this book, because I think you would enjoy it. But I do kind of want to read, like, Jamie Lynn Spears' book now. Like, I'm just kind of curious, because she has a book, right? I'm curious about her side of the story. You know what I mean? Because I don't think Jamie Lynn Spears is necessarily a villain. I think Jamie Lynn Spears is also a victim to a certain degree. And so I'd really like to kind of hear her side of the story as well. So the next book I read was Shark Heart by Emily Habeck. And this book was actually pretty interesting. And it was funny that I read 2 books with characters turning into an animal, like in the same month. But this one was really, really interesting. Now, the thing I really liked about this book was how it was written and, like, set up, the format of it. It's written almost like a play with, like, dialogue and everything, but not only that, it also is, like, just snippets in time. So each page is just, like, a snippet in time. Like, that's how the story is told. So, like, one page will have 1 paragraph, and then the next page will have maybe 2 paragraphs, and then the next page will have, like, a whole page, and then the next page will be, like, another short paragraph or even a couple sentences. And so the story is told through snippets in time, basically. And I really, really liked that format, to be honest. Like, I wish more books were written in this way. But basically this book is about a woman, and her husband gets diagnosed with this really rare condition where they turn into an animal slowly. and he is turning into a great white shark. And basically it's his story of like all the symptoms that he goes through and how hard it is on him and how hard it is on her, and like, you know, their therapy and what it does to their, you know, relationship and all of that kind of thing, and then kind of his full transformation into the shark, and then like what happens to them and her relationship with her mom. There's kind of like two stories going on. Like you read all of his story of turning into a great white shark, and then you kind of turn the page and you start reading all about the main character's mom's story. So it's kind of like two stories in one, but they really do like connect really well together. And it kind of helps explain the main character, the girl's story, so much more. Now, the thing about this book is it sounds really, really weird, and it is, but it's also not weird. And I think what she did really, really well with this is that she kind of made this illness of turning into an animal seem very realistic. So it feels almost like the author wanted to use it as a metaphor for like cancer or like any other terminal illness, and like what it does to the loved ones, the caretakers, the person that's actually dealing with the diagnosis and things like that, and like how you deal with it after and all of that stuff. So it's kind of just a metaphor for like, you know, terminal illness. But there was one scene in this book that I loved. I don't think this is a spoiler. If it is, I'm sorry, and if you don't want this, then you can just skip this part, but I don't think it's a spoiler. I don't know. But it's when the guy is fully a shark, and the kind of philosophical things that he thinks about while he's a shark, and like what he does while he's a shark. It's super interesting the way that she wrote it, and like, I don't know, there was just some really, really great things about this book. I gave this book 3 stars, but it's definitely a high 3. I would almost say it's a 4. Like, you know those books where the more you think about it, the more you want to give it a higher rating? That's kind of how this book is for me. Like, I kind of want to give it a higher rating now that I've like sat on it for a while. But I would highly recommend this if you kind of like weird fiction, more serious fiction, or if you like things told, like real human struggles told in a very unique way, which I tend to really, really like when things are told kind of metaphorically, but they're using that metaphor to tell something very realistic about the human condition. Sort of like Night Bitch, how it was kind of talking about motherhood, but in a very weird, unique way. Or The Pisces was kind of like that, how it was talking about like attachment styles, but in a really unique way. This is talking about like terminal illness, but in a very unique way. And I think I love when authors can do that, because it takes a lot of creativity. And so I think that this book was really, really good in that way. So I recommend this. Will you 100% love it? I don't know. I think that it could be a hit or miss for a lot of people, but I gave it 3 stars, and it could potentially be a 4. I'm not sure. So the next book I read was a Kindle book, and I read this during Christmas, and it was Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey. Okay, so when I read this book, I think I talked about this actually in a recent video, and I can't remember what video it was that I talked about this in, so I'm just going to mention it really quick. But one thing that I'm noticing with Tessa Bailey's recent works is insta lust, or that feeling of like being super sexually attracted to somebody, and like that's where the romance stems from, is just like this sexual attraction, and like that is it, and you're like, where's the romance? Like, I need the romance to like really feel connected. It was this book that actually I think made me realize that, and that's why I was kind of like, I don't know about this. Now, it wasn't horrible, but one thing I can tell you is this is not a Christmas book, so you can read this book at any time. If you like 70s rock stars, like Daisy Jones and the Six type of vibes, then you may kind of like this. It's basically about this duo. They're called the Steelbirds, and it's these 2 women, and their kids are the same age, right? And this rock star duo ended up getting in this huge fight like in the 70s or 80s, and they broke up, and everyone wants their kids to get this rock star group back together again. So these 2 kids, they're adults now. They decide that they're trying to get like this rock star duo back together by doing like this weird reality TV show, and through that process they kind of like fall in love or whatever. Now, this book is weird because like it's such a like unique plot. Like, this book is very random. Like, the plot line is so unique for a romance, and so it's kind of fun to read because it's just a really unique plot line that I'm just kind of like, okay, like this was really out of the blue, but I'm here for it, I guess. But I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best romance I've ever read by any means. I think I gave this book 3 stars, but it's kind of a good book if you like really unique plots with a little bit of romance sprinkled in, I think that this might be good for you, but yeah, it just wasn't my all-time favorite. So yeah, I gave this 3 stars. So the next book I read was Little Darlings by Melanie Golding. So this book I read while I was wrapping presents. Like I said, I always read a thriller while I wrap presents for Christmas time. And this is the book I decided to read, and this book was okay. This book was okay. I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if maybe I need to switch up my genre that I listen to on audio, because one thing I start to notice is thrillers can all feel very similar when you listen to too many on audio. And because thrillers are like the only thing I listen to on audio, I feel like that's kind of happening. And this one, I don't know if it was just because the plot was a little bland or if I'm just burnt out on audiobook thrillers. I don't know. But this one was just kind of forgettable. Like, it was supposed to be really scary, but it just didn't feel scary. And it's also one of those things where I'm like, okay, what happened again? Like, I don't actually remember the ending very well. And I think that's a bad sign sometimes when you finish a book and you like can't remember it a few weeks later and you're like, I actually don't remember how this book ended really. And that's kind of how this book was. So I'm not saying that this book was bad, but it's kind of about a girl who has twins, 2 twin boys, and she's in the hospital, and then weird things start happening, and she starts to think that her twin boys are changelings. And she's like, these are not my twin boys. Like, these are not them. I know that they're not them. These are 2 completely different kids, and no one believes her. And she starts to uncover, you know, why she feels this way about her twins and like how to switch them back. And it's kind of a weird, dark story, but it's just, it wasn't one of those books that really just like sucked me in. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't really suck me in fully. Like, I've definitely read psychological thrillers that really sucked me in more than this one did. So it was a little on the forgettable side. So I gave this book 3 stars. So the next book I read was Divine Rivals, and I was so excited to read this one. I was like, I have a feeling I'm gonna give this book 5 stars. Like, I just have a really good feeling about this one. And I really did like this book. I gave it 4 stars actually. Now, the only reason I didn't give this book 5 stars is it was a little slow and dry at times. Like, there was definitely some big chunks where you're just kind of like, okay, you know? That's the only thing. But the overall romance and the overall story was really, really well done. This is the perfect book for people that want to like dip their toes into fantasy, but they don't want too much world building. Like, things aren't fully explained, you know, like there's magic that happens in this, but like it's not really all that explained, which I'm 100% fine with. Like, I don't always need my magic systems to be totally explained, or like gods and goddesses to be totally explained, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't always need that in my fantasies, and this just doesn't have that. So if you're okay with things not being fully explained but just having like a sprinkle of magic, this is definitely it. And there was just a lot to this book that was very vibey, you know what I mean? It definitely has a lot of vibes. A little bit of like a found family element as well, which I really liked. And basically this book is about a woman who is really poor. She's in a very, very, very hard situation, and so she ends up getting a job writing for this newspaper, and she's basically competing with this guy for this top writing position, and she ends up not getting it. The guy, I can't remember what his name is, but he ends up getting the promotion, and she's like, well, crap. Like, I need to like move on then. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I'm gonna go and write for this other newspaper, but I'm gonna write on the front lines of war. So she ends up going to war to write for this other newspaper on the front lines. And then there's also this really interesting plot line where she's like writing these letters on a like magical typewriter, and she writes these letters about her life, kind of like diary entries. She puts them in her wardrobe, they disappear, and then she'll get letters back in return. So she starts writing to this random person on this like magical typewriter, and it's just very interesting. Like, it's a very interesting concept without too much explanation, you know what I mean? So I really liked this. The second book, it's actually out and I haven't read it yet, but I can't wait to read it because this did end a little bit on a cliffhanger. So I think the second one is going to be really good. I'm really excited to read it, and I highly recommend this. If you just want like a very simple, fun duology that's a romance, like, great book. So the next book that I read was Make Me. This was by Tessa Bailey. This was in my Best Books of the Year video, and like I said in that video, not for everyone, okay? Like, I'm aware it's not for everyone. I feel like romances are just like that. Like, I feel like I'm starting to like really understand that when you pick up a romance based on the synopsis or like what people tell you that it's about, and ask yourself, is that my favorite trope, or is that a trope that I don't like? Because romances are so specific to tropes and the types of things that you like, the types of characters that you like, and that's why not everyone likes the same romances. You know what I mean? Like, everyone has their thing. And I feel like this book was very much just my thing. I said 4.5 stars. This just honestly scratched an itch in my brain. Gave me an excessive amount of everything that I love in a romance. And that's exactly what it did. It scratched an itch in my brain. Like, I love a protective love interest that is like the hero, right? That always wants to save the day. Like, I love a damsel in distress. I'm sorry, I just do. And that is exactly what this book was. Like, that's what she based this main character off of, to like give you an excessive amount of that type of person. I thought it was so cute and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I have a feeling I'll read this again in the future just because it had everything that I like. Like, this isn't as good as Archer's Voice. Like, now I have to like put everything at Archer's Voice level, and it's like any romance that isn't Archer's Voice level, I'm like, is it a 5 stars? Like, it's not Archer's Voice level. But this is still really good. This is like a 4.5 probably, so. Really liked it. So that is all the books I'm going to do in this video. That is all the books that I read last year that I haven't gotten to update you guys yet. And then I'm going to do another wrap up of the books that I read this year. And like I said, I'll do that in like a makeup wrap up video. So I have like 5 books I already have to wrap up from this year. So anyways, that is it, you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you guys in my next one. Bye!